and it is so like musky, and you've got it's humidity is like 90, 95, 100% some days. And growing up, growing up in Louisiana, or at least in my 20s, I used to carry around with me a change of clothes in my car because it was expected that you're going to start the day wearing one thing, sweat through it, and have to put on something else before you see anyone that night. So, you know what? It's not the best. If you're considering moving to Louisiana, off chance you're considering moving to Louisiana, don't even consider it. Just go somewhere else, and that will you'll thank yourself for that. You don't even know that yet, but you will.
Yeah, we weren't going to dive into this, but can't do humidity. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah,
I would, I would go for a weekend. I am currently in Omaha, Nebraska, so we get humidity as well. But my wife and I are moving to the West Coast where there's zero humidity. So
that's incredible, bro. I was just in Montana last week. Are the skies as big in Nebraska?
Yeah, it's kind of a thing. I mean, I've lived in Nebraska for 5 years. I came from Iowa, so zero difference whatsoever. And it's the same thing. It's literally corn and then one big city. And I live in the one big city, Omaha.
I was thinking, I was like, okay, wait a second. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is completely off subject. But are there a chain of coffee shops out of Nebraska, out of Omaha? Is it Scooters? It's like a drive-through.
Scooters. I got it this morning. Scooters? I stopped in. So here's the deal. I am a coffee snob, so it's like a local version of Starbucks. So it's not that great, but what I do love is their flavor of the day. So what it is it's like literally the most random coffee ever, and it tastes good. Just black coffee. They do like snickerdoodle, cinnamon. It's all over the place, but I get it. It's like a $3 cup of crappy coffee that I enjoy.
If you're not getting some snickerdoodle coffee to start off your day, what are you doing with your life?
Right. Yeah, we have a coffee machine in our apartment complex where I press a button and it gives me the worst coffee I've ever had in my life, so it's an upgrade. But, on the Sabbath, you got to rock with some real good coffee, though.
100%. Well, let me say this. So whenever I was 28, I went to live overseas for a year. I lived in Stockholm, Sweden.
Wow.
And although I would know how to navigate it better now, like back in that day, my version of coffee was, okay, I'm going to make some Folgers, and then I'll put like a ton of coffee mate in it, and it'll just be sweet to cover up this disgusting flavor. Well, I got to Sweden, and a few things were different. Number one, they did not have coffee mate. But number two, they also didn't have Folgers. So what I learned was there's such a thing as great coffee, and you don't have to get this black coffee and just load it down with sugar and cream and stuff like that. So now I am I'm a high level coffee snob. I'm either pour over V60 Chemex. I just got a handmade coffee machine from Amsterdam. It's called a Mocha Master. And so that's me. But if Europe taught me nothing else, it taught me how to make a great cup of coffee. And you know what?
Yeah.
That's a mark of loving yourself.
No, that's big time. That's ministry 101, just kidding.
Listen,
I have a pour over. I have a Chemex.
Josh, you need to watch out.
Joshua 1998. It's a thing.
Come on.
So Daniel, tell me a little bit about you. I want to hear the 4-minute version, your story. Obviously, we kind of know where you're from, but walk me through who you are, what you do now, maybe what you did when you were in your teens and all that.
Well, I can tell you what, there have been many versions of Daniel, as I'm sure you find with most people that you interview. But let me say this: starting off from like a super young age, I always wanted to be a pastor. I mean, I was like 4 years old. My mom's like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Like, not an astronaut, not a police officer, not a fireman, nothing like that. Maybe I had a little paleontologist stage where it's like, man, I'm really into
Yeah.
dinosaurs, but I grew out of that one. And I wanted to be a pastor. And it was funny because we didn't really attend church regularly. And my dad never went to church. But we probably went like once every 3 or 4 weeks. And I just loved it. So growing up, that's all I wanted to be. You ask about Teen Daniel. Teen Daniel was in a screamo band. This was the days of Under Oath, Hawthorne Heights, The Used, My Chemical Romance. That's what I did. There for a while. I was like, I could give my life to music. But whenever I got about 20 years old, I got an opportunity to jump into the church world, and I fell in love with it. And so all through my 20s, basically 20 to 28, I was in full-time vocational ministry. I was a youth pastor for several years. I was a young adult pastor for several years, and I was obsessed with it. Like, I mean, I'm still obsessed with it. Doing ministry has been the highlight of my life. At the end of that 28 years, or at the end of my 28th year of life, not of ministry. I'm not that old. I went to Sweden for a year. And I feel like God graced me with this huge, like, a Sabbath year of I'd kind of spent all of my 20s in full-time vocational ministry, didn't really get to travel that much, didn't, vacation a ton, didn't, do any of those things. And so I took a year off and I went to Stockholm, Sweden. I enrolled in really a lightweight, like, Bible academy. It wasn't heavy. But I just got quiet, and I spent that year just being really quiet with God, learning more about who he is, learning more about who I am, sharpening some skills that I had never really had a chance to develop because I was just, pedal to the metal with ministry. And I emerged from it like a different person. And I came back from Europe, and I just was open-handed in every way possible. I was like, God, what do you want? Like, I'll do anything. Like, I'll go back and I'll work for the church. I'll be a janitor if you want me to be. And, it was at that time I had an opportunity to travel with this pastor from Sydney, Australia. And as I started traveling with him, I was like, God, this is incredible. Like, I'm living my dream right now. I just got off of a year from Europe. Now I'm traveling everywhere doing ministry with this pastor from Australia. And I said, God, I've got to make money. This this lifestyle does not pay for itself. And I just said, God, if I was going to make money helping people, because that's how you make money, you help them solve a problem.
Right.
I said, what could I do? And I just thought, man, I felt like I was a pretty good youth pastor. So what if I helped youth pastors? And so for the next year, I just kind of said, what does this look like? And it took on a few different renditions, but fast forward to now, I run a company along with a small team called Youth Pastor Co. The URL is youthpastor.co.com was taken. I was super audacious though. But we also have an annual online conference, Youth Pastor Conference, which is actually youthpastorconference.com. We have a few subsidiary sites, but really our passion is resourcing the local church, as well as making memes and as well as now making party games. So that's probably what we're a little more known for in our company is producing cards Christians like. So that's life for me.
Yeah. Well, it's so incredible. And what I love is doing this podcast, I've never once heard a story that's the exact same. It's so random, and I love how unique God makes every single story. And it all comes back to this main theme of being faithful, seeking God, but also resourcing his church in different ways.
Right. What's incredible is I remember whenever I was in my early 20s, I used to try to create a picture in my mind of like, if I was living like the dream life, what would that be? I was like, I would be married to this girl. I would live in that neighborhood. I would be working for this church. Our youth group would be that big. And now looking back, I'm like, well, God, you crushed that. Like, you
Yeah,
absolutely
right.
took my biggest dream and destroyed it. You went so far beyond it. And I think it is, like you said, it's a testament of just being obedient, because there were definitely some like trials along the way where maybe I could have opted for something else, but instead I went the long way, or I went the harder way, all in the name of, I feel like the Spirit of God's leading me in this direction.
Yeah. And what I found is there's a lot, and why I said that there's no story that sounds the same is because, Daniel, just like what you said, I think a lot of young 20-year-olds, and I'm a young 20-year-old, looks at a Daniel or looks at whoever we look up to and go, well, I'm just going to be like that. But we don't understand that there was 20 years of different stories, which creates a different product. And I love that. And I love that you, getting out of youth ministry, you're still in it resourcing youth pastors. And to be honest, I think a good portion of my demographic is youth pastors or people in youth ministry. So speak to me about youth ministry. Like you said, you're so passionate about it. You run a conference, you run an organization. What is youth ministry in 2022? And speak to it.
Well, let me say this. First off, I want to backtrack and say one thing. Like, God doesn't make two molds identical. Like, we can have a shared purpose, but we're never going to walk the same path. And so that is my encouragement to the younger youth pastor is embrace the purpose, embrace the plans that God has for you, but know that your path is going to look completely different, and that there will be long stretches and seasons of time where you are wrestling with, this does not look like I thought it would look. This does not feel like I thought it would feel. But let me say this, I feel like it was a majority of my 20s. Like, of course, I was doing things, and looking back, you can see a highlight reel of fun, fulfilling, very fruitful ministry. But it was painful. It was difficult. And so I just want to encourage anyone out there, just keep saying yes to God. Keep saying yes to God, and you'll never regret it. But on to youth ministry. Youth ministry is insane right now. Like, it looks.
Yeah.
I can't say it looks completely different than it did whenever I was a youth pastor, because there's certain anchors that are likely not to change in youth ministry, and that is the goal of the youth pastor is to point students to Jesus, facilitate an atmosphere of God's presence, disciple and help lead students on the sanctification process, and help them live their life as an example to where their peers would come and want to plug into that same process that they're going through. And hopefully whenever they graduate, they go to college and they live a life that they're like, you know what, I'm really proud of this. And so, one of the things that we really focus on outside of curriculum, and obviously curriculum is a centerpiece of our company, but one of the things we really focus on is pastoring the pastor. We want to come alongside youth pastors and say, hey, look, you don't have to try so hard, which sounds like the complete opposite of it, because it's like, oh no, we have to have, our Instagram and TikTok has to be going off. We have to have this banger service every Wednesday night. Like, our band's got to play the new, like, what did Elevation Rhythm just drop? We've got to do that. We've got this game that's insane. And this is what I would say, like, let's pull it back a little bit. And let's make the main thing the main thing. And what is that? You as a youth pastor having a vibrant relationship with God. I like to say, and of course it's not original to me, but in the spiritual world, things are more caught than they are taught. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can give you an example, like a true youth pastor that I am. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to spend the day with Bubba Cathy. That's Truett Cathy's son. I want to say he's the senior vice president of Chick-fil-A. And there was like
Wow.
4 of us. It was like Bubba and one of his longtime friends who he like co-teaches Sunday school with, and then me and one of my friends. And somehow or another, we got into this where we got to spend some time together, and it was about 4 or 5 hours. And we were at the headquarters. We had lunch. We walked around. We met people. We went to the archives. This is what's insane. By the end of that day, I was marked. I was challenged and had entered into the first step of transformation towards what a better future could be for me. And it's not because Bubba came alongside and said, Daniel, you're a little rough with people. Why don't you be nicer? You know what I mean? It's not because he came up beside me and he said, man, like, let's crack open the Bible and see what Jesus has to say about generosity or excellence or, anything like that. He lived in such a way that I was captivated, and I would say, transformed. This is not a salvation experience. I'm not saying like, oh, he's saved. I'm saying I was so challenged. I could not unlearn. I could not unsee and unexperience what I had experienced that day. And because of that, it set me on a new trajectory. As youth pastors, we are called to live our lives in such a ways where students who are just struggling, or they're depressed, or they're living lives of compromise, or they're not interested in Jesus, where they see you living in such a way to where they say, I want that. And it's your opportunity to say, oh, it's not the goodness in me. It's only the goodness of God. And share the testimony of, oh, I know you see this life I live now wasn't always that way. My God, I was so broken. My God, I was so, just shattered if it wasn't for God. You know what I mean? And so I'm one of these guys who I'm like, man, let's have a vibrant relationship with Christ before we try to preach messages, before we try to tell the funny stories, and I'm all for that. Like, listen, I'm not like a prude at all. I'm like, brother, let's get out there and have fun. But more important than that, man, do we have this rich relationship with Christ? Is the presence of God just so powerful in our ministries? Are my leaders and volunteers living that kind of lifestyle? Am I willing to sacrifice to reach the one? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I an example in worship, or not? Am I just like making sure like my fit looks right? You know what I mean?
Now you're speaking my language.
Come
yes,
on. Hey,
100%.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. You know what frustrates me? This is just a hot take. Not really a hot take. I think we'd all be in agreement.
Soapbox. Listen, brother, I'll shine.
Enneagram 8 over here with no caffeine. So we out here. You could put it in any context, youth ministry, any ministry like that's involved with the local church. The pastor not being a part of worship and the worship team not being a part of the message. Holy smokes. You want to talk about frustrating. It's like, and then they wonder why there's no worship culture. It's like, I wonder why. Frustrating, but 100%.
Here's the thing. And you'll know this, you'll understand this. The culture of your ministry is the culture of you.
Yes.
You set the culture. You define the culture. And if you're like, oh, like our youth ministry is boring, wake up, brother.
Right. Yes.
Maybe you should get more interesting. You know what I mean? Maybe you should lighten up and have some fun. Your students are looking to you to set the temperature, and whatever you set it at is where it's going to go. And of course, I mean, there are exceptions. Like, listen, if you just got there, if it's your first week on the job, if the church culture is one way, and there's exceptions.
Right.
But largely, we have to take responsibility for the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
If your students don't worship, it's probably because they're not seeing you worship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
Correct.
I became the middle school pastor. I'm charismatic by nature, and
Mm-hmm.
I was the youth pastor at a church that was not as charismatic, not even non-denominational. They were a denomination that wasn't as
Hmm.
charismatic. And at
Yeah.
the end of the year with my middle schoolers, they were like shouting me down. They were like, "Amen, amen." Because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, part of how I was raised, I was just like, in God's sake, and again, amen. And they're like, "Amen." You know what I mean? And then of course
Right.
they loved it. It kept them more engaged. Middle
Mm-hmm.
schoolers don't come like that by default. You know what I mean?
Right.
They are taught that. But at the end of that
Mm-hmm.
year, I had these denominational middle schoolers who were raising their hands in worship and who were engaged and who were, into the messages. And I'm still proud of them. Like they
Yeah.
lived
That's big time.
remarkable lives. I can say that because now most of them are like married with kids.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they're in their upper 20s now. My first group of junior high students
Wow.
that I had. But I think a lot of it is because of the things that we instilled through the culture, and they're not going to pass
Mm-hmm.
you up in culture. You have to set that.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I was in a conversation with a panel with some like youth pastor, and I'm not a youth pastor. I was in youth ministry for like 4 years, I think. But yeah, I think it all goes back to the Sunday as well. The Sunday experience. Like, do the people go on a Sunday or get locked into a local church outside of your ministry? Because our ministry, like that's where you see high churn after high school, in my opinion. Like, there's a high churn rate because they weren't attached to the church; they were attached to a different ministry name of the actual church. So I want to ask you this, and this is kind of like a deeper question, I guess. Speak to the youth pastor who speak to motives about youth pastors. I'll say that. That's how I'll frame this question. Speak to the youth pastor and their motives and how important it is to have pure motives about preaching God's word every week and pastoring students.
Yeah, it's dangerous. This is what I would say. I come from two polar opposite camps. So what I'm going to say is a paradox. In one hand, I'm like 20-year-old, 18-year-old, get out there and preach. Brother, use your gifts. Like, develop, learn, grow. The truth is, you can't expect maturity out of someone who's immature. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the danger is when we don't grow out of that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think there's probably some who get into youth ministry and they've got a bad motive, and they grow up and they mature. Why? Because they live life and things get hard and they become dependent.
Yeah.
And they look back and they realize, man, I don't think I was doing it for the right reasons after all. You know what I mean?
Right. And we've all been there.
The other thing, right, exactly. The other thing is for, the youth pastor who, maybe you know it, maybe you don't. Maybe this isn't as much of a paradox as I thought it was. Because I'm going to shift gears and say something that I think is more valuable that my pastor taught me. For the young youth pastor out there who would say, no, like, this is all for God. That's the most, I would say, best veneer that we could ever have, because it is for God. No matter what you do. Yeah. Is it for God? Yes, it's for God.
Right.
You know what I mean? But of course you said, what's your motive? And motive goes deeper than the veneer. And for those who would say, yeah, it's for God, like, this is not even for me, I'm not getting anything out of this, I would say this. My pastor told me something. It might have been one of the most valuable things that I've ever been taught. And he said this. He said, Daniel, the hardest thing for a person to do is to be honest with themselves.
Wow. Yeah.
If you think about it. No. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. No, the numbers don't. No. Well, hold up.
Mm-hmm.
Do they not? You know what I mean? And I think that as we learn to be honest with ourselves, we can start to overcome some of the things that are inside of us. So if you're new in ministry and maybe you can be honest enough to say, you know what? This is for God, but also I love being on the stage. Like, hey,
Right.
this is for God, but hey, it does kind of feel cool whenever someone, sends out, tweets something that I said, which no one does that right now. Or,
You're right.
you know what? I'm sorry. I'm stuck on Elon Musk buying Twitter, so I'm still.
No, I'm about it.
Right now. Yeah,
Same.
come on. But you know what? Someone put me on their story. Someone, you know what? My quote's up there. My preaching clip is up there. I like that. They'll be honest enough to say, this is for God, but also I hope this podcast gets a lot of downloads. I think just being honest with yourself in the process is a huge step of saying, God, I recognize that you're using this. And I'm just asking, would you help refine my heart? You know what I mean? The reality is, I don't think anyone under 40, and I'm not 40, I'm 34. Don't get any ideas. I don't think anyone, maybe even under 50, maybe even under 60. I don't know. I don't think anyone under that age can be like, no, I've got completely pure motives. Completely pure
right.
motive. I don't think it's until you've lost it all. Until you're limping like Jacob. Until you are so stripped down to nothing and rebuilt only by God that you can say, you know what? I actually even forgot that I'm in this equation at all. I'm so passionate about the lost meeting Christ. I'm so, passionate about people who are walking in death coming to life. I don't think it's until you are completely taken out of the equation that we can say our motives are pure. I would love to think, I've had some ministry opportunities. I don't have to be the guy anymore. You know what I mean? Like whenever I was in my 20s, like I had to be the guy. Like, no, I want to speak. No, I want to do that. I don't have to be the guy anymore. I would love to think that every time I preach, my intentions were pure. That would be my desire. You know what I mean? I would desire to be completely pure. I don't think I am. I think there's still like this little part of me that has not died, that loves it whenever someone says my name. You know what I mean? And I think we're all on this journey of less of me, more of you, less of me, more of you. And it only happens with time. God sanctifies us. He refines us. And it just does not happen overnight. So that's where I say if we're walking away with something, and maybe I just disarmed some of those who were like, no, I'm pure-hearted. And then they think about, yeah, actually, maybe there's a little bit, maybe my motives aren't completely pure. And yeah, I did wear my better shoes on that day and stuff like that. I think the thing to walk away with is, hey, can I be honest with myself? And can I be honest with God? And can I bring that before God and say, God, would you help me with this? Because really, I want to be all about you and your glory,
Yeah. Well, that was such good context. And I think, I don't even have to respond to that. It was so good. Yeah. I think being honest with yourself and something that I've found, like you said, a lot, reflection can help a lot. Like when I sit with a journal and reflect on my beginning years of ministry, or even see the results of my immaturity in other people, I'm like, holy smokes. But also, I love that you said, like, no, you know what? I kind of like it. Like that's the thing that I don't think we give people permission to do that, though. I think we as pastors or leaders cancel the person who would just be open and honest. Like, hey man, I actually really like that sermon that I preached. It was kind of fire. He's like, okay, cool.
Would
Like,
you
I would
listen to
rather,
my
I would,
podcast, please? Like, I want to get a million streams on this message
yeah,
I just preached.
100%. I mean, I would be, if somebody messaged me that, I would be
For
so
the gospel,
pumped that they,
baby, for the gospel. Listen, we're
yeah,
just trying
I'm
to
trying
get
to
as
reach more
many
people
as
for Jesus.
possible.
Could you please share my podcast? It's like, come on, guy. But
Yeah.
no, I
it's
love
true.
that. Yeah.
I think a mark of growth is, hey, let's just be honest. Let's be vulnerable. Let's be human. Okay. I can connect to the guy who's a failure. But the moment someone's preaching to me and they're just like an image of perfection, well, you've already lost me because I'm not.
Yeah.
That's not me. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah, that always freaks me out. I was in a preaching course with somebody, and they were talking about how when people preach and they speak to things that they've only experienced, like, yeah, I was actually in the Seahawks locker room last week, and everybody's like, I've never been in a Seahawks locker room before, man. I'm out.
Can't
it's like,
relate to that. Sorry,
no.
I told the story about me and Bubba Cathy.
No, it's fine, dude. I went to Chick-fil-A like twice this past month, so we're totally in the same boat.
I ordered a number one earlier today. I completely feel you. Basically.
No, 100%. Tell me a little bit, like, as we wrap up in the next 4 or 5 minutes, tell me a little bit about Youth Pastor Co., Youth Pastor Conference, like the business side of things. Because I'm more, I would say, in the business world right now than I am just in like full-time ministry. As my wife and I are moving, and I love it. I love the business world. I'm an advisor for about 150 businesses in Omaha. So I love the business world, but I just love organizations that are resourcing the local church because I think that's how God designed it. So talk to me a little bit about Youth Pastor Co., Youth Pastor Conference, all the things you guys are doing.
Let me say this. I love business just as much as I loved ministry. I'm still in ministry adjacent.
Right.
Business is fun. You want to know what feels great? Giving money to the church.
Yeah.
You want to know what feels great? When someone's planting a church and you're like, hey, I can support you for the first year. You know what I mean? Or someone's a young 20 missionary in Africa. Yeah, no, I can give you money each month. And, because I have lived that life.
Yep.
I love being in business. Not just because of the, hey, we get to bless people out of this, or not just because hey, we don't have to worry about how we're going to pay rent this month or anything like that. I love business because it's a challenge. And it's numbers, it's psychology, it's struggle, it's art. It is incredible. Let me say this. I have learned more about life through business than almost anything else that I've done. And so I want to encourage, any youth pastors or anyone else who's listening, get a side hustle and just
100%
be curious. I have, you never arrive. And in fact, I would say this. Let me just talk a little more to business than about my businesses real quick.
Yep.
You never arrive. My business journey started 2 years before I made $1. Like it was, I was broke by the time our platform launched. Like I was in debt, broke. And I had never really been in debt before. That's why I say I was broke. But you have to learn so much. There's so many programs. There's so many ways to connect with customers. There's so many ways to deliver products. But here's the thing. You as an individual, you're an expert in something. What qualifies as an expert? You know more than the next guy. You know what I mean? I just know more than you. If I was to coach you in business, it's not because I know everything. It's because I know more than you. You know what I mean? If that was the case. And so you don't have to wait to be an expert to start your company. Do you know shoes? Start a shoe business. Do you know baseball cards? Start a card business. Are you into Pokemon? I've got a friend start a Pokemon business. Go for it. Whatever you do. I got a friend who has a Lego business.
Let's go.
Another
Lego
friend who started authenticating sports memorabilia, and now he makes more authenticating sports memorabilia than he does at his full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets to write off all of his professional games that he goes to as business write-offs. So
Yes, he
anyways,
does.
let me say this. Do business. Youth Pastor Co. Absolutely love it. We're turning 4 years in 2 months. It's a subscription sermon series library. We have almost 100 sermon series that we've built over the past few years. We like to say this. Each month, Youth Pastor Co. brings together the most creative minds in youth ministry to build sermon series packages that are powerful, relevant, easy to use. I love our products. I created the product that I wish I would have had when I was a youth pastor, because the first time someone put curriculum in my hands, I wanted to throw up. It was so stale and sour.
Yep, 100%.
Youth Pastor Conference, a free 2-day conference. We have 20 speakers, each speaking for 20 minutes, absolutely free. Last year, we had not Rich Wilkerson Jr., we had Judah Smith, we had Levi Lusko, we had Nona Jones from Meta, Facebook, we had Francis Chan. We've had so many people. Next year, it's going to be even better. Sign up for Youth Pastor Conference. It's not live right now, but once again, it's youthpastorconference.com. And Cards Christians Like. That is it's my favorite. It's my new favorite. Cards Christians Like. We've had so much fun. We've only been shipping them for 1.5 years.
Wow.
And we've already shipped out over 35,000 games.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to learn how to run a company.
Yeah, real quick. Yeah.
So,
is that what was the main source for the scale of that? Was that like your social media? Was that just? Let
me say this. It was the divine favor of God.
Yeah.
We didn't have any platform we were pushing it from. I would say this. It was the cry of the people. We created a product that so many Christians have always wanted and never had.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what's your favorite Christian party game? Yeah, there are none. We're the only
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
I don't know, like musical chairs. Is that a party game? Is that
right?
Like that?
Fist fighting? Just kidding.
But I would also say this. I had a leather chair. I was sitting in my leather chair one day. The idea hit me. I totally, in the moment, I said, I think that was God. And of course, I had never done anything with physical products. I said this. I said, if I do it and the game fails, I'll know it was me. If I don't do it, I'll never know. But if I do it and this is successful, then I will know that I just heard the voice of God. And so that's what motivated me to pursue the dream of creating the game. We launched it on Kickstarter 7 months later. We raised, $15,000 the first day. At the end of our Kickstarter, we'd raised right shy of $200,000.
Wow.
The company transformed overnight. So if you have an idea, go for it.
Do it.
You never know. It's it's changed my life and it's taught me so much in the process. So,
well, that's incredible. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I bet you and I could talk for the next 3 hours about strategy and business growth and company culture and scalability and marketing and
it's a whole nother podcast, a whole nother podcast channel.
100%. I love that stuff, man. The more I get, I'll say this and we'll wrap with this. The more I get months away from being in full-time ministry, like just for a season, the more I realize how much more effective I am in ministry, literally connecting with business owners, and again, I think it honestly just comes back to where there's wind behind your back in that season of like God's put wind behind your back in this. And then maybe next year it's not. And it's like, cool, take a step back, move over here and being aware of that. But I could only imagine you have millions of stories of people being impacted through Youth Pastor Co., through your conference, through a game, right? It seems so just like it's a game, but it's so much more than that because you created a solution to a problem in 4 billion people in the world. So you did it.
So thank you, God.
Yeah.
It was a privilege to steward that idea.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was low-hanging fruit. Anyone could have done it. I feel like God protected the idea for the right group of people who would do it the right way. And we spared no expense in the writing, production, and distribution process. And it just continues to grow to this day. So
yeah. Well, it's incredible. Well, tell us a little how we can get in contact with you, maybe how we can buy your board game, how we can sign up for your conference.
Yeah, I would say this. If you're a youth pastor, check us out at youthpastor.co. Later on, youthpastorconference.com. If you are a Christian and you enjoy having fun, cardschristianslike.com. Check it out. Check out the game. I can almost promise you, money back guarantee, that you will love the game. If you want to know more about me, you can follow me on Instagram at Daniel Madry. Just to be honest, I'm active, but I'm not that active. I love it, but I'm not in love with it. So that is the Instagram account of a real life Christian man / entrepreneur, and that's all you're going to get.
Yep.
And of course, my beautiful wife, Ellis. You'll probably get a lot of her, and also none of her because she's taken, actually. Yeah, if you want to email me, hit me up, Daniel at youthpastor.co. We'll chop it up there. But yeah, that's it. If you can't get in touch with me through that means, I'm shocked.
Yeah, then you aren't effective at, you need to figure out a different podcast and learn how to connect and network.
Is not your thing.
Yeah, texting and DMing is not good. Well, dude, seriously, thank you so much for being on. I learned so much. I wish I could have taken notes while I was listening, but that would not be effective in this podcast. So I'll have to re-listen to it. And I'm sure that everybody listening to this has their notebook out and they took notes because you spit some fire bars today, bro.
Because note takers are history makers.
100%. I'm
still a youth pastor.
You are. That's why you're relevant, because nothing's worse than some guy who isn't relevant and is a little wonky, But you aren't one of those. You're incredible.